Welcome back to another sub-episode, sort of.
Follow-up.
Follow-up.
What do they call it?
Modified with Trick Factory.
This is like the...
0.5.
The director's...
Oh, director's cut? No.
Notes?
The uncut
notes. Anyway, so we're trying this out. If you haven't listened to us before, or this is your first time watching, my name is Elvis.
Tim.
Rob.
And we talk about modified cars. We have a lot of guests in the automotive space on the podcast, and we are starting something a little bit different, or trying something a little bit different. So we have all these guests, and we talk a lot of different topics. And sometimes the topics, they can dive from one place to another very quickly. And so we don't get to kind of like, we still sometimes might have some ideas of some points that we want to share, but for some reason it just like naturally flows to another part of the conversation, which is fine and it's great. But we just wanted to.
It seems that probably what would be the best part of the podcast happens after the podcast.
I know, yeah.
So that's kind of what inspired this whole thing. Is like every time we stop recording, then we have like, oh, that was great, like blah blah blah,
and we have a 15-minute extra conversation.
So we're gonna try to add the conversation in after the fact.
Yes, and so we're gonna see how it goes. So we just had Horizon Motorsports on, Horizon Motorsports LLC. They built the most amazing Camaro, I would say.
Whoa.
It's the same thing in the 60s.
Oh, man.
A Pontiac Trans Am was the same.
You can't say that. No, I don't even think it's a Trans Am. It's a Firebird.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Firebird.
Well, I just made a lot of blunders right now.
Yeah, you go say that to somebody that drives a Firebird.
Light him up in the comments.
No, but wasn't like the 69 Firebird and the Camaro based on the same chassis,
Same
car?
platform, but
They look almost
you
identical.
know how it goes in the car world, man. You can't mess
my
around.
gosh. Well,
that's like saying a 318 is the same as a 335. You know how one that went.
You know, Elvis, what we say here in the shop often, if it was any less the same, it'd be more different.
Oh my gosh. Well, they built a Firebird. Yes.
Yeah.
And with IndyCar suspension and IndyCar, the thoughts of pretty much an IndyCar when they went into the build. And it was mind-blowing the first time I saw it. And we had been following this build for how long?
Probably a couple of years now.
Well, yeah, they've been at it. So they debuted it last year, 2023 SEMA. And that was sort of like when they brought it to the world's attention. But they've been building it for a while. I mean, obviously a car of this caliber, with what they got going on, is a lengthy process. Mm-hmm. And after our conversation with Russell and Cameron, the father-son duo of Horizon Motorsports LLC, we got a chance to sort of dig in just a little tiny bit. But our podcast got, it was 2 hours long. We barely even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's a lot to think about, and that's kind of what makes us want to talk about it again a little bit right now.
Yeah. And so were there any points that you guys, I mean, there was a lot of points, but was there something that you remember that you're like, oh yeah, like to take away from that?
Well, my biggest takeaway from it was the actual father-son dynamic, and then listening to his story, and then his ability to stay engaged and see this thing through all the way to the end, and then the learning process and where he started and where he is at now, which kind of leads into this discussion. We actually didn't even talk about the car that much.
No, which is wild, yeah.
Talk more about what it took to create the car.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and their dynamic between the two of them, which is really, really rare. I mean, I don't know of very many father-son duos that accomplish such a monumental feat. Like, this is a big deal.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
the
still
car
jealous.
is amazing.
I'm jealous about their relation. I'm like, oh.
Absolutely.
yeah,
So
absolutely. Most father-sons just like,
Yeah.
Right. It is so amazing. Russell Cameron, the father, he's a very accomplished man, has a lifetime of experience in IndyCar champ, or what do they call it?
Champ car?
It was a kart racing series for a little bit. It's gone through a couple different names, but essentially open-wheeled racing cars, kind of like Formula One. So super high tech, very, very amazing. And he has like a lifetime of knowledge and experience, and really
circle
good
of friends.
Pretty
that
amazing.
he very
Right?
casually touched on.
So what I thought was really significant is how Cavan, the son, how he kind of, was inspired by all of that. I mean, as you might suspect, it's kind of a big deal having your dad, do stuff like that. I mean, I can only imagine. But anyways, he got himself into motorsports engineering. That's the path he's still pursuing now. What he said, he was like 2.5 years into his program,
education. Yeah.
So he's got a couple more years yet to go, and
Full-time
it's
student.
obviously like a really, really intense program. And this car was built in his off time, with his dad. So I mean, that's super rad.
As like an internship. I'm like, who has that type of internship? It's just so cool. Wild. It's just amazing.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like one of those kind of things. Like if he didn't take advantage of that, it would just be like, whoa, opportunity lost. Like his dad and all of his dad's friends and all that experience and more than that, mostly is like the mentality that I gleaned from their sort of their duo, the father, the son. They both have like this really intense sort of driven mentality that is very admirable. So I imagine they'll go pretty far if they decide to do that. If not, I'm sure they have at least another car in their sleeves that they're probably going to build.
Oh yeah.
Kind of looks like they're going backwards though.
How
the next
so?
car looks simpler.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny because you listen after the fact, and that's why we're having this discussion, because there's like all these little things that were just very casually said.
Yeah.
That were like, oh yeah, it just so happens that 3/4 of our facility is the storage facility for Ray Hall Racing or whoever it was. I can't remember exactly, but it's like, you have IndyCars cars
references,
right? As reference that you have access and inspiration and all these kind of things from. So it's like the casual. It's just like, oh yeah, it just so happens we got a couple.
I mean, I like when he said that, I was like, oh my god, can you imagine having that? Like you just walk across the room and you're like looking at like the most amazing cars that could possibly be engineered, and you just like stare at it for hours. And I think Kevin actually did mention that. He had done that oftentimes when he was designing parts. He was let's just go over and like, how did they do that and why?
So having that as a reference is crazy.
Amazing.
Super cool.
I've been to, like, when I was younger, I just remember being just mind blown by looking at the cars themselves. But I feel like more recently, I've started to lean into the engineering behind the cars. Like, I think a few months ago, we went to Seattle or somewhere in the Washington area to this dealership, and they had like an Indy car there and a Formula One car. And I was like, I feel like I was more interested in the way the suspension was set up than the actual look of the overall car.
Every time we talk, and it's like the focus of our conversation always is packaging. It's like, how do you package it? Because the package ultimately determines the aesthetic and its functionality and its serviceability. These are all things. So if you think about how much technology and awesomeness that they have to package
in such a small
space,
footprint,
like that probably feels like you got all the room in the world when you put it into a full-bodied car.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I imagine like Russell was probably thinking that and reflecting.
It's like hot dog down
a lot of times. Like, yo, we got all the room in the world. I remember he did say that like once you start adding all the bits, it does start closing up space pretty quick, and we've seen that. Anybody that's built anything like a car, once you get all the bits in it, it's like you run out of room.
The size generally and efficiency generally starts to compound financially as it gets smaller and more capable. So we tend to have to stay within this realm. So the packaging's probably, but in their realm, it's like, yeah, it's this big, but it's 10 times much more money.
Yeah.
It's just really cool. Like the whole, again, father and son dynamic was still the standout of the whole thing, because it's like for example, like your kids, like do they like cars? Do they care about cars?
They don't have any interest in it at all. So, which is fine. So we leaned into what he was interested in, and he's found success in his thing. But as any dad, especially one that's had a successful career in motorsports, I guess it could go either way. You're like, don't come over here, just go do something smart. But he leaned right into it, and now he has probably the biggest leg up ever.
Pretty cool. And again, like he's grown all these relationships with sponsors too, as a result of delivering what they promised to do. And that was also a huge part.
Well, I think that's comes from the dad. Like he didn't really, he expressed the importance of it, But if you think about what the foundation of what an IndyCar team is basically it's sponsorship.
Yep.
Because it's a useless racing series. It doesn't achieve anything. Well, seriously, any race team is Of course, you can always like touch on the development aspect of it, but racing is a very frivolous thing.
Very true.
So those 90% of what makes a race team work is the sponsors.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a lifetime of relationship creating, and they're funding everything. So I think you got a leg up on how to manage those relationships.
Networking, working with your sponsors, creating those relationships, and
creating a return for them.
Yeah,
That's a big part. Like you have to create a return, and if they don't see it, they're out. So in that level of sponsorship is even crazier because it's strictly monetary.
Yeah.
So it's like even probably harder. Whereas if they give you parts, there's a cost of production, and they're not losing. There's still some investment, but that's just straight up hard currency.
Yeah.
And hard currency, I can tell you, because we put on events and we do all this kind of stuff, so we get major sponsors all the time. Getting cash out of these people is tough. Very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So it's like the expectation when they do that and when they're writing checks is really, really high.
Yeah, so they had that mentality, at the get-go of this project, and they came into it like anybody should nowadays. They had like a proper rendering done, and they had a game plan and what they wanted to achieve and when they wanted to achieve it by, and they put that forth. And anybody listening out there, if that's what you want to build cars and stuff, this is kind of like what you need to do.
Yeah, so this video has been sponsored by HPA Academy. They are pretty much the biggest resource, or one of the only resources for learning about
so part of the conversation with them, and like we went back and forth, actually, me and his father, about all young guys wanting to get into the industry and how can they get a start and all this kind of stuff. So there's like, I always tell these guys, you need to find some kind of foundation in one of the disciplines. But this would also be, if you're just trying to do it on, ultimately you could probably turn it into a job or a career, but it's a good starting point to learn about specific things. So like they touched on suspension and they touched on aerodynamics, and there's you can do a standalone course through HPA on that specific topic, or you can get their master class, and then you get access to all things motorsports. So this is kind of like, it's a good resource to get started if you want to know more about or follow along in some of the conversations that we have, because they're talking all kinds of wild terminology, and I know what it's like. You're like, oh, okay.
Lost half of
So like a lot of times just finding out the definition of the terminology gives you a jumping off point to know what they're talking about.
They say knowing is half the battle.
Right?
Yes. And on HPA, they have so many courses. Like I'm taking some of their courses as well, because I want to learn how to be a better fabricator, builder, all of that. And they have so many, even if they were not sponsored, or even if they didn't even approach us, I would still use their stuff, because I've come to you guys in the past and I'm like, what have you guys heard about HPA before? And like, I want to take their courses and all of that. And you guys were like, go for it. Because
absolutely. Because we're the same.
Hadn't, but I had heard of other people that had had success with it.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I previously recommended, but now that I've become more familiar with it and I've actually listened to their podcast, it's cool that if you have a specific challenge, that you can just take a course just on that. Like if there's a single module just on that might help you resolve your problem. But they have fabrication, they have welding, and then a lot of their guests that they have that help them develop these things are like, they're legit dudes. Like this is what they specialize in. So it's a pretty cool resource that even I've found myself leaning on now.
I have, definitely, for sure.
And they have cool guests. Like I know they just had like Joe Scarbo from Scarbo Engineering on, and I'm like, wow, that is. And they've had like so many other really cool guests. And so some actual examples of the courses, because it's really cool how they structure stuff, but I just wanted to get some like specific examples down. So they have one whole like area that it's like suspension and chassis setup or car setup, and in that there's like 38 or 83 lessons on motorsport wheel alignment alone. 83 lessons. And like they have like practical corner weighing and even wheel and tire fitment and brake system design. So even from the big like macro to the micro, like they have like a huge variety of stuff.
Which for most people, the general part of it is probably enough for what you're doing on the street.
Yeah.
Which helps alleviate some of this. Like you have these conversations, everything ends up looking like the hammerhead if you listen to other people. But if you actually know what these things do and what you're trying to accomplish, you probably don't need all that stuff. So this is a good way to find out what your expectations are and where you need to be.
Yeah.
To achieve your goals, not some internet trolls.
Very
goals.
true. And you're finding out the why behind a lot of the things.
Exactly, the why.
Because like starting out, like no one ever taught me any of this stuff of like suspension setup and proper, like, I don't know, just basic, even the most basic things as to why you're doing stuff. Like, why are you putting bigger, for example, my Datsun 280ZX, I put these fat wheels and tires. The wheels and tires weigh like almost 200 pounds? Each?
No, not each.
No,
I think they're like 80 pounds, 77 pounds.
Yeah.
So rotating mass
I didn't
has
know
a
anything.
massive impact on the whole rest of the car.
Yeah, I didn't know anything about that until you guys told me. And if I was just a normal guy, I noticed whenever I'm steering, first of all, the wandering is kind of crazy, but like it's harder to turn it, and like at high speeds, it's not as stable. And I'm like, oh, why is this happening? And obviously it's because of the bigger wheels and tires.
Yeah, and so like, you bring your car in, you ask any one of us, and we're kind of hands-on guys. Like we're not formally trained, educated. So we just kind of like, we figured it out the hard way a lot of times.
We're educated in our disciplines, but not in all disciplines.
Not in all. Okay. So like you'll ask us like, oh, why are you doing that? Like when we're doing like say a wheel alignment on your car as the example, like, well, we need to do this. So blah, blah, blah. It works properly. I can't really explain why. So then the information that you can glean out of these kinds of classes through HPA.
Yeah. So like one of the things that was touched on by his dad was he has an intuitive knowledge of why you need to do things, but not a technical knowledge of it. Even though he was in the IndyCar world, because he's around it and he can see it and he was able to witness the benefits and the increases of certain changes, he just knew like, oh, okay, you do that, you get that. But on this side of it and the Sun side of it is more the technical side. Like this is exactly why you're seeing that benefit, which is what HBA can help you do. Because they get into like, they get very geeky about it. So if you want to take it that far, it comes in levels. You can go deep as you want.
Yeah. And it's cool because you can actually get certificates out of these things too. So there's like a spot after you've taken all the classes and all of that, you can request a certificate and they can give it to you. So if it's something that you actually want to even take professionally, like this is a recognized resource.
Yeah, because me, even as an employer in the shop, if you come to me and you're like, hey, I've taken all these things, at least it shows a certain amount of investment and a basic foundation as a jumping. At least you understand the principles.
Yeah.
Then we can go from there. But if you just come in and like, I just want to build cool shit, and you're like, me too. Like, what have you done so far? And then again, like we mentioned in the podcast, like, go take this course, it's 5 months. And they're just like, oh man, that's a long time. I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah.
So it's like, at least this, you can try all the different disciplines and see what you have an aptitude for. Like what piques your interest. Because everybody wants to go do auto body. Auto body's shitty. It's hard and you have to have an aptitude for it and want to do it. So you have other ways to get in. You could be a welder, you can be a fabricator, you can be a wirer, you can be a mechanic. So this is a great resource to find what suits you.
Yeah. And we also have a discount code too. Our discount code is TRICK50. And if you use that discount code whenever you're buying any course, you get $50 off, which is, I think, a really good deal. And I think the courses they're not that expensive. Like literally one or two McDonald's meals, probably.
Yeah, they're very reasonable. I would even go so far as to say
that was the old you. Now it's probably
McDonald's meals. Yes, I know. No more McDonald's for me. I'm done.
Yeah, great resource. So I'm glad they wanted to be partnered up with us,
and it gives us a place to direct people to, find some education.
Yeah, because like you do get hit up all the time. People always want to know like how they can get into this industry, and it's just difficult. But this definitely gets you sort of at least understanding terminology, the what and the why, and that'll help.
And the range is crazy, like right from the fabrication side to tuning all the way up to CAD design. Pretty and machining. Like it's
now, Elvis, I bet you when you started your Datsun, if you had this resource,
oh my gosh,
can you just imagine how much more significant you would have been by the time you got to the end?
Yeah, and even so I could know what it was going to take, because for example, like looking at it from the outside, like for example looking at your car, it just looks like it's like, oh, this is a sick car, but you don't have any knowledge as to how much work it actually took to get there. And so if I had known, maybe I would have taken a different route to a lot of the things that I did, but I had no clue as to how much time or how much effort, or if I even liked doing the work. Like I know now that I'm like, I do not like working with fiberglass, but it's a necessary evil. So maybe I would have gone another way with like even making things look better, or how to fabricate better, or even welding. Like I had no clue how to weld.
Yeah.
And I was just like watching YouTube videos, but a lot of those people, there are still great resources on YouTube, but the problem with YouTube is it's free for all for the most part, and so you can get someone that
the range
has no clue how to do anything, teaching people what they should be doing, and so I feel like I did not learn the proper way to do things. I find that
YouTube people tend to gravitate towards people that match their level of resources and attention span.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can only afford to do this way, so they find somebody that matches that, and then you're stuck
Go with
there.
that, yeah.
And it's like, that's not what you should do. Because you'll find a guy that's like, oh, this guy's, okay, he's got a crazy machine, he's got this, he's talking all kinds of wild shit. I'm just going to find somebody that's dumb as me. Perfect. And then that's where they go. So it's like, you're better off finding like an unbiased resource that can, give you a jumping off point.
Yeah. And so I think that is it with HPA. So
shameless plug.
Yeah, no, shameless plug. But again, even if they were not sponsoring, like even before they approached us to ask to come on as a sponsor,
I've legitimately recommended.
Yeah, like I've looked at them multiple times, and they have like crazy discounts too, especially in the holiday season, which is great for you guys, because even they have probably better discounts than even what we're giving you.
If you got a buddy that is hacking up his car and could use a little bit, this would be a great holiday gift,
Christmas present,
without hurting his feelings. Like, hey, maybe you want to take this course.
Yes, 100%. And so with that said, anything else with regards to, before we wrap this up, because we just wanted to make this kind of like a short and sweet type thing, but do you guys have anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we keep doing this, because every time we do it, we end up talking about the podcast after the podcast.
Yeah.
And it's usually generally a pretty good conversation. So
sweet. And so if you guys have any questions for us too, we can also use this as a question answering section, because sometimes with having guests on, we're not really able to ask or answer any other questions. So let us know, hit us up if you have any questions at media@trickfactory.com. And again, check out HPA Academy. Link is going to be in all the links into all their different courses. And the main website is going to be in the description of this podcast. And so again, Trick 50 to get $50 off any course, pretty much. So with that said, we'll see you guys next week. Bye.